Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. We're going to be exploring a really fascinating concept today, the actual cognitive engine that separates an ordinary mind from a truly extraordinary one. We're talking about associative thinking. So let's dive right in and find out exactly how the greatest minds in history managed to connect the invisible dots of the universe. Okay, let's kick things off with a pretty bizarre connection. Picture this. You're just watching water swirl down the drain of your bathtub, right? To most of us, it's literally just water emptying out, nothing special. But to an associative thinker, that little swirling vortex is like a mirror reflecting a massive cosmic principle. They look at that everyday, tiny household thing, and somehow they associate it with the direction of the Earth's magnetic field lines. It's all about seeing a pattern in the totally mundane and scaling it all the way up to the profound. So let's nail down a definition here. What exactly is associative thinking? Basically, it's the ability to grasp a specific, usually isolated, phenomenon in the natural world, and then, using that exact phenomenon, drawing analogies, making inferences, and establishing these sort of unseen threads with other related factors. It's a completely divergent way of looking at things. It's about breaking out of that rigid, straightforward logic a lot of us use and just letting your mind branch out into completely new territories. Let's look at how this actually builds, step by step, using probably the most famous example in scientific history. Isaac Newton didn't just wake up one morning with the laws of physics fully formed in his brain, right? Step one, he observed a completely common, everyday natural event, an apple falling to the ground. Step two, he associated that fall with an unseen pulling force, gravity. Step three, he didn't just stop there. He connected gravity to much broader concepts, things like mass, velocity, spatial distance. And finally, step four, he derives the three laws of motion. He basically took this single thread of association and pulled it all the way to a fundamental truth of our reality. It's just incredible. But here's where it gets highly relevant for us today. You might be sitting there thinking, okay, sure, this works for physicists staring at spiraling bean vines or trying to figure out buoyancy from floating wood, but what about the rest of us? Well, as you'll see, associative thinking isn't just for uncovering the laws of physics. It extends way, way beyond that. It reaches deep into everyday, highly practical professions. In fact, experts in highly practical fields rely on this literally every single day to read the hidden stories right in front of them. Think about it. A really good detective takes the smallest input, maybe just a few seemingly random clues, and from that they deduct a suspect's personality, their motives, where they might be hiding. A forensic expert, they look at a victim's injuries and can associate that data to visualize the actual physical appearance or the clothes of the perpetrator. Or take a traditional Chinese medicine doctor. They observe something like a patient's complexion, and they associate those really subtle outward signs with internal organ disorders. In all these cases, they are connecting an observable, A, to a completely hidden, B. And honestly, we can scale this up even further to massive societal shifts. Take an economist. They might look at one specific global event and immediately associate it with future stock market trends. A sociologist might see a sudden rise in crime in a specific area and link that to a broader loss of a nation's moral values. Or consider the sheer creative intuition of a fashion designer. This one's wild. They can observe something as tiny as the pace of people's footsteps on the street or a fleeting popular color in a neighborhood, and they associate that specific energy with the future direction of global clothing trends. It's all about reading the signals. Now, I want to pose a question here to deliberately pause our momentum for a second. Think about this. If a farmer knows that after winter comes spring, and they prepare for spring plowing based on those changing weather patterns, is that farmer utilizing associative thinking? It kind of sounds like they're connecting the dots, right? What do you think? Well, actually, scratch that. The answer is no. The farmer is not using associative thinking at all. And this brings us to a massive misconception we really need to clear up: the stark contrast between simply having applied experience and utilizing true associative thinking. You see, applied experience is really just a reflection of accumulated knowledge, your memory, standard routines. True associative thinking, on the other hand, demands originality. It's inventive, it's divergent. It literally requires the creation of something entirely new. Let's break down a few of these common examples just to really prove the point. The farmer predicting the spring plowing. The person whose knee acts up with joint pain right before a massive rainstorm. The businessman who buys winter coats in autumn knowing he's going to sell them in December. These people are simply applying long-standing experiential summaries. They are just reflecting standard, learned rules in their conscious mind. They are definitely not breaking new ground or diverging into unknown territories. To really cement this rule, consider this quote from the source material. If a college student claims to associate an apple falling to the ground with universal gravitation, they are merely stating the knowledge they have learned, unless they have never heard of Newton or were unaware of the concept of gravity. Basically, true associative thinking requires absolute originality. You can't just recount someone else's brilliant discovery, you have to forge that path yourself. No shortcuts. So, what does this all mean? The absolutely crucial point here is this. Strictly speaking, associative thinking is the specific type of thinking that actually leads to new discoveries, new inventions, new creations, and new theories. The individuals who actually drive the slow, monumental progression of human civilization forward, they are the ones who possess this specific ability. They break the rigidity of standard thought. And honestly, without them, the civilized society we live in today literally would not exist. All right, let's ground this in a highly practical thought experiment to really prove the real-world value of this mindset. Imagine you are tasked with this exact problem. You need to transport 6 tons of cargo from point A to point B, which is 800 kilometers away. Let's look at how 3 totally different types of thinkers would approach this exact same problem. First up, we have the materialistic thinker. Now, materialistic thinking is incredibly rigid and literal. To move this cargo, they rely on basic brute force math. So they figure out that even if they get incredibly strong workers who can each carry 50 kilograms, and those workers walk a grueling 100 kilometers a day, it's still going to require 120 people working for 8 full days to accomplish this task. Aside from the massive blisters and endless complaining, it's wasteful, it's laborious, and it's highly, highly inefficient. Okay, so contrast that with the image thinker. Image thinking is all about imitation and copying. From an artistic perspective, it's beautiful. Maybe even greater than materialistic thinking. But practically, well, the image thinker might draw a stunningly realistic picture of the cargo being moved. But, as the source material brilliantly puts it, when you are starving, a steamed bun can provide actual sustenance. A highly realistic picture of a steamed bun, no matter how beautifully drawn, doesn't actually solve your hunger. It doesn't solve the practical problem at hand. Finally, we arrive at the associative thinker. This thinker breaks completely free from that rigid materialism, and they totally surpass mere image imitation. They find a completely new pathway. They realize, hey, I just need to put one person inside one heavy truck, and we can knock out the entire 800-kilometer journey with all 6 tons of cargo in a single day. The efficiency and problem-solving capability here, it is just on a completely different level, a real game changer. But, and there is a but here, this leads us to a fascinating, almost humbling realization. Associative thinking is incredibly powerful, for sure, but it still falls far short of truly grasping the ultimate, profound mysteries of our universe. Even the absolute greatest associative thinkers in human history, we're talking Newton, Einstein, Planck, Hawking, they all eventually hit a wall. We see this in their tireless yet ultimately unfulfilled efforts to establish a completely unified field theory of the universe. So yes, there are limits, even to this incredibly high level of thought. To understand what lies beyond that wall, let's measure the evolution of human thought against another massive problem. How do we actually exchange information across the vast expanse of the Atlantic Ocean? Let's walk through this. The materialistic thinker looks at the ocean and says, well, we must physically cross it. Their solution? Build physical ships and send physical people across the water. Then, the imagery-based thinker comes along. They look for a direct physical connection and decide to lay massive undersea cables stretching all the way across the ocean floor. Huge improvement, right? But then, the associative thinker steps up. They associate information with unseen energy, and their solution is to use completely invisible radio waves to transmit the information instantly through the air. As you can see, each level drastically, fundamentally improves upon the last. But here is where it gets really interesting. The author of our source text, when addressing the members of Lifechanyuan, actually warns them not to limit themselves even to associative thinking. They state that it is still a lower-level form of thought. Think about that for a second. If ships are material, cables are imagery, and radio waves are associative, what on earth comes next? The author sets up this ultimate evolution of thought and leaves us with this incredible, provocative cliffhanger, simply stating, and our approach is, what exactly is that ultimate level of thought? Well, that is a massive mystery that leaves us all with something pretty profound to ponder. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning, keep connecting those dots, and I'll catch you next time.